at least Sagar is somewhat intelligent. He's not an absolute dumb fuck. And they have, I'm not saying he's not a fascist or some shit, because I don't know about that. Some of the shit he says freaks me out. Like he's got some very anti-corporatist views, and I'm like, yeah. And then he says some fucked up shit sometimes. So they were talking about Rachel Maddow and her wishing the president well. Now, as you know, on this show, we do not wish the president well. We are on
Trump dies of COVID watch.
When I did the story on the FREAKIN news, it had Party in the USA behind it. I don't give a shit about the motherfucker. But they had Glenn Greenwald on, who I really enjoy, and he was making the point. I haven't watched this yet. I think he made the point, like, why did Maddow wish Trump well if he thinks he's a fascist dictator? That's a very good point. So let's listen to what they have to say.
Trump tested positive for coronavirus. Democratic Party figures like Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, even Hillary, they expressed statements expressing their support for the president. Russiagate ringleader Rachel Maddow even dedicated a full Get Well segment to Trump in which she encouraged.
Well, isn't that the decorum? That's the political theater kind of thing to do. Isn't that the way it's been done forever? That we're supposed to stand behind our leaders? I might be losing the stream. Yeah, it looks like we've paused, at least, for a second. I don't know, it's hanging on. I've completely lost my train of thought. Okay, we're back. The stream is a go. The chat is ready to display messages.
Urge viewers to have the same compassion for the president as you would for a friend with lung cancer.
And as Intercept's Glenn Greenwald notes, maybe, just maybe, it's possible Democratic leaders don't really believe some of the things that they've said about President Trump over the past 4 years. For example, calling him a racist, a fascist tyrant, all for political advantage. Co-founding editor at The Intercept, Glenn Greenwald.
Well, now that's an interesting take. I would actually think it's the opposite, that they don't actually wish him well. They don't believe what they're saying when they send him well wishes. Huh.
Joins us now to explain how they sort of reconcile those two messages. Glenn, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Glenn.
Good to be with you guys.
Absolutely. So just lay out the argument that you were making in the piece here.
So I've always had a distaste for the practice of liberals and Democrats anointing themselves the resistance from the very beginning of the Trump presidency, because typically the resistance is a term used for oppositional movements that are endangered by a tyrant or a despot. It's something, for example, that got applied to...
Now, I halfway agree with him there. But I mean... It's because that the Democrats haven't responded appropriately to what is an actual existential threat. Not that the Democrats are being hyperbolic in their language or leftist. I mean, is he lumping in people like me with the Democratic establishment like Rachel Maddow? Because that's an odd thing to do. But now, I even thought the resistance name was pretty fucking stupid, at least for establishment Democrats to use. And I was working for a right-wing radio host at the time that Donald Trump won. And one of the things that I came up with for his brand was that hashtag resistance is futile or something like that. That would have been the tagline for his online show. Resistance is futile. So, like, even I was, like, mocking them using the term resistance.
Jews who fought so valiantly in the Warsaw Ghetto against the Nazis, or against the French who were fighting Nazi occupation under the Vichy government. And so it seemed like a very inappropriate and self-glorifying.
And Glenn Greenwald knows. He's well aware. I believe he does live in Brazil at the moment and is being persecuted by a fascist government.
Term, because the implication is the U.S. is no longer a democracy where you can vote the president out of office, that it's now actually a dictatorship where to oppose him or to criticize him.
We're getting ready to find out. Joe Biden is almost certainly going to win by at least 5 or 7 million votes. Can you vote the president out of office? We will see. I've said all along, that's going to be the issue. I think he's going to lose the election. Now, is he still going to be the president this time next year? You know, if he doesn't die, because we are on
Trump dies of COVID watch.
You in the kind of danger that resistance fighters typically have been in. And lately, that rhetoric has escalated rather significantly as the election approaches, where it's now commonplace in Democratic discourse to explicitly say that Trump is a fascist dictator, and even to invoke Hitler and Nazism to suggest that that's the proper prism through which we ought to understand the Trump presidency.
There are a lot of parallels with Nazism, the American Nazi movement especially, people like George Lincoln Rockwell and their fascist movement in the mid-20th century.
And if that's the case, if Trump is some kind of a fascist...
Okay, I'm glad he threw that qualifier in there, because Glenn Greenwald is a smart man. I hope that ultimately he is doing the criticism, but he's coming at it from the opposite way.
Dictator who is posing to end American democracy and freedoms, or has already done so, who puts dissidents in danger, then you would expect the reaction to news that he has a fatal disease and might die not to be one of sorrow and lament, but one of joy and celebration.
And jubilation, kind of like we've been here on the Troll Patrol.
That's typically how people react.
That's a real resistance.
Are ill, or when they're in danger, or when they die. And so there's this obvious tension, this conflict between, on the one hand, claiming Trump is like Hitler, or is imposing fascist white supremacy tyranny on the United States, and on the other hand saying, we wish you a speedy recovery, Mr. President. We hope that you get...
But once again, like, it's not Nancy Pelosi and shit saying that he's a fascist dictator and stuff. Their language is never that strong. So it's kind of lumping in the left wing with goddamn centrist liberals.
Get back really soon to the fascist tyranny and genocide that you're imposing on the United States, and I thought it was worth exploring what accounts for that tension.
Well, what does account for that tension, really, Glenn? I mean, what? And actually,
cognitive dissonance.
What type of political discourse do we want? I actually want the one where we, generally we're like, oh, the democratically elected leader, hope he gets better. Even if we disagree with him, get out there. Even if you want to see him, then he can be voted against. I mean, what does a good political discourse around something like this look like in a democracy? And how undermining has it been, the type of rhetoric that you're talking about there?
See, that's a really good question. Like, I like Sauger and I don't like Sauger. Excellent question.
Well, in general, I agree with you. I think that not only our political system, but we as human beings are healthier if
that might have been
we are
his
not
feed.
wishing death upon other people, if it's not standard or commonplace for us to celebrate the suffering of other human beings. I think that when we start doing those things, it coarsens not only the society, but also ourselves. And so in general, I think it is a very important aspiration to say that no matter how much we disagree with someone politically, we're going to resolve those political differences not through violence or wishing death on the other on someone, because that can lead to very negative results, but through political processes, through democratic competition, through debate and words and discussion rather than death. But the assumption of the question is that we have a working democracy. If we actually have somebody who
There you go. Now we're hitting the main point here.
gets elected and then proceeds to dismantle the mechanisms of democracy and does start to impose tyranny, fascist dictatorship, then I'm not sure that it is true that it's healthy to say that then recovers and gets healthy. Maybe it is healthier to say, oh, we hope that person dies, or we're going to celebrate if they do. That's what people do in tyrannies when their dictator dies.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. I agree with Glenn Greenwald there. Let's leave it at that. Who knows what he says after that?